How's it going, everybody? My name is Joseph Perrin and I'm the owner of Prisma Powder Coating. Today I'm going to show you how to powder coat like a professional. We're going to go over each individual step of the process. Each step is super important, so don't skip through any. Prep is one of the biggest things when powder coating. So we're going to go over the prep process, the powder coating, the cure process, everything you need to know. So let's do it. Okay, so the first step to powder coating is choosing a part to powder coat. And there are some parts you can powder coat and some parts you can't. Really, anything that can hold 400 degrees without melting or lighting on fire or turning to ash is a good part to powder coat. You don't want anything like a plastic or fiberglass or something that shouldn't be heated up for a long period of time. So for this example, I just used a plasma CNC machine we got in the shop to cut out a Santa sleigh. And I cut this out because Christmas is coming up and I thought it'd be a cool little ornament to do. So this is made out of 14 gauge steel, something that can withhold quite a bit of temperature. And so it's gonna be a great part for powder coating. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this piece over to the sandblaster so we can start getting it cleaned up, and hopefully we'll get to powder coat this and it's gonna turn out amazing. All right, let's get over to the blaster. Okay, so I'm over here at the sandblast cabinet, and we use this cabinet for any of the smaller parts we do in this shop. So this is gonna be great for this Santa sleigh we're gonna be sandblasting. Before I go ahead and throw this into the cabinet and get it all prepped, I wanna talk to you guys about why we sandblast as professionals in this industry, why it is so important. Because you guys need to understand the reason behind the process, because your part might not be exactly the same as mine. So if you understand the fundamentals of powder coating and sandblasting and prep, your part's gonna turn out a whole lot better. So with this piece, you might be looking at it and it looks like it's bare metal, right? Well, it's not. It has a layer of mill scale on it. And what that is when the plate that we use to make this is hot rolled, it causes that little flaky layer of mill scale to develop on the surface of the part. So in my case, I'm going to be sandblasting this to remove that mill scale. You might be sandblasting to remove old paint or powder coat or any old coating on your part, but for me, I just got to get rid of this mill scale. So that's one reason we sandblast our parts. The other reason is when you sandblast, it puts a little texture in the piece, kind of like a sandpapery texture. And that causes the powder coating to adhere so much better. And once we spray the powder on it, it's gonna come out perfectly smooth after it's cured, but that bond between the part and the powder is gonna be way stronger than it would be with a smooth surface. So now that you kind of understand the process and the reason behind why we sandblast, we're gonna throw this piece in the booth and get started on the prep work. Okay, so the part's done, it looks great. Before we move on to the next step, I'm gonna go over a little bit about what material we run in our sandblaster. So we use an 80 grit aluminum oxide media. And when I say media, that's referring to the sand in the blaster. There's a few different grits you can use. They have a 60 grit aluminum oxide all the way up to 100. That's kind of the range we stick with. I'm sure that the range goes farther out on both ends, but right in the middle at that 80 grit aluminum oxide is great. They make a lot of other media, so you don't want to go with a steel shot media if you're blasting aluminum, right? You want something a little bit softer, and this aluminum oxide works great for steel and aluminum parts, so that's why we stick with this. As for this part, that is what it should look like once it's blasted. Really smooth, all uniform, one color. Should have a little bit of a texture on it, but not much. So now that we've blasted this, what I like to do is find a little S-hook. This is how I hang most of my parts, but you can hang them with really anything. You could use a screw into a thread, or however it's going to be easiest for your application. So now that we got it hung, I'm going to take some compressed air and blow off any of the sand that is left over on this part. You don't want any sand or media or any other materials on your part besides the bare metal. So I'm going to go ahead and blast that off. Okay, so now that we got the part blown off and it's just bare metal with no contaminants, I just threw it in the oven. And what we're doing here is we're outgassing the part. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this oven up and head back over to the other side of the shop so I can explain a little bit more about what outgassing is and why it is so important when powder coating. Okay, so we're making progress here. We got the part in the oven, but you might have noticed the part is not powder coated, right? It's just the bare metal. So what we're doing here is we're outgassing the part. And this is super important because what outgassing does is it heats that part up to 450 degrees for 15 to 30 minutes. And it releases any moisture or trapped gases in the part. And if you don't outgas and those gases or moisture comes out after it's powder coated, you'll see bubbling or pinholes in the surface of your powder coating. And it looks really bad, trust me. So you don't want that. You've done so much work to get this part prepped to where it is. Take the extra step and outgas it. It's super important. We're gonna leave it in there for a little while. I'm gonna let it do its thing. We're gonna pull it back out, and then we're gonna re-sandblast it quickly, and then we'll be ready to do the powder coating. Okay, so our part is done, and if you look at it, it's a different color. The reason it's a different color is because when steel gets super hot, it starts to blue, and that's what this did. That's how I know it outgassed properly and it reached the temperature it needed to reach. So this probably got up to around 500 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes. It's a little bit on the higher temperature and longer side, but it's better to be safe than sorry when dealing with a part like this. So now that it's outgassed, we're gonna put it back in the sandblaster. We're gonna sandblast it lightly, and then we're ready to powder coat this thing. Okay, so we're here in the booth, finally ready to powder coat. And as you can see, I got the sleigh re-sandblasted and I blew it off with some compressed air to get any of that sand off the part. So what I've done is, as you can see, I've connected a ground cable directly to the part. For what I'm doing here, this is gonna be the easiest way to get my ground hooked up. But if you're doing a part where you don't want any ground marks, you can hook it up somewhere higher. It's just not gonna get quite as good of a connection, but as long as your hooks are bare metal, it'll get a pretty good connection. So we got this here, we are ready to coat it. I'm gonna be coating this part with a Gema powder coating gun. So this is a really high-end powder coating gun. Your gun might not apply the powder quite as evenly and smooth as this one does. I started out with a Harbor Freight gun, and I kind of know how that feels. So don't get too frustrated. If it doesn't work and it doesn't look right, just blow the part off with compressed air and put it in the oven for 5 minutes till it gets warm. That decharges the part, and then you can powder coat it again. So let's go ahead and get this sleigh powder coated. Okay, so we got it all powder coated. Now that it's coated, go ahead and remove your cable. Make sure all your corners are coated because that's gonna be the hardest spots to coat on one of these parts. So now what we're gonna do is, you see where there's a little bit of a mark from our cable, we're gonna go ahead and just touch that up without a cable. Just do that quick and it will be okay. So there we go. The part is coated and it is ready to go in the oven. Okay, so the part is in the oven and it is finally curing. The instructions to cure this powder that I'm using is 400 degrees for 10 minutes. That does not mean set your oven for 400 degrees and put the part in for 10 minutes. It means set the part at 400 degrees, get the part temperature to 400 degrees, and then leave it in there for 10 minutes. The best way to tell what your part temperature is using one of these temp guns. You just point it at the part, pull the trigger, and it tells you the temperature of the part. So these are really cheap and they're kind of a must-have for powder coating to make sure you're curing your parts properly. The next thing that's really important when powder coating is making sure your air lines are dry. You need to have a water separator or an air dryer or something in line between your compressor and your gun. If you don't, you'll get a lot of imperfections in your powder coating when you see the final result. So, super important to make sure you have dry air. The third thing is a good ground. As you saw, we hooked up that ground wire to the part, and with this gun, the ground is through the outlet and there's a grounding rod in the ground. Just make sure you have a really good ground. If you want to go the extra mile and get a copper grounding rod and pound it 8 feet into the ground, go ahead and do that. It's really worth it. It helps your part look a whole lot better, and it helps that powder just adhere to the part much stronger than it would if it didn't have that grounding rod. Just make sure you're grounding directly to the part as well. If you have a setup that doesn't ground very well, if you're grounding to somewhere on your booth, it just takes a lot more for that ground to reach the part. So as you saw, sometimes I'll ground right to the part, then pull the ground off and just spray that spot to get the powder right there. It's not the perfect way to do it, but for the DIYers and the people doing parts like this, it's the easiest way and the best way to ensure you have a good ground. So that part has another 20 or 25 minutes on it in the oven because we got to reach part temperature and then cure it out for 10 minutes at part temperature. So we'll wait for that to finish, and when it's done, I'll show you guys the final result. Okay, so now for my favorite part, the final product. Turned out really good. We chose kind of a mattish red. I think that just looks really good with the sleigh versus a shiny red. So turned out awesome. If this video helped you out, please leave a like. We're gonna be making more videos like this. If you have any other questions, just leave me a message in the comments and I'll get back to you. And let me know what you guys wanna see next as far as powder coating goes. If you wanna see the setup that I have and how I run all my equipment, or even how I have done it in the past with maybe the Harbor Freight equipment. Because I've done a lot of it and can definitely give you some tips. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.